How to play ARCS. This is something I threw together quickly for all of the new players who want to get prepared before receiving the physical copy of the game. I'm using Tabletop Simulator and will refer to some commands used to make playing the game easier. Because of this, I will not go into all of the details regarding setup beyond what the mod will do automatically. Depending on your player count, you will need to refer to the rulebook for main differences in setup. But since the mod will handle that in our 3-player game here, I will not be going into those differences. What is ARCS? ARCS can be played in one of 2 game modes referred to as small ARCS and campaign ARCS. This video will cover and teach small ARCS. To get started though, you will need the mod. Here is the mod address. So you just go to the Tabletop Simulator workshop and you will search for ARCS, and the first one will be one by Cole, and this will include everything that you need to play. It's not super scripted, but it does have all of the components necessary to play. And then here is the scripted, fully scripted, or I guess much more scripted version by Quinsicle. This is the one that I will be using, and it does have some really useful commands, especially for like sorting the cards and setting up the game. In ARCS, you lead a spacefaring society through an epic saga as you try to survive in the harsh and dangerous reach at the galaxy's edge. A game of ARCS will last until someone has enough power. When the game ends, the player with the most power wins. You gain power by completing ambitions, which are objectives declared while you play. These are scored at the end of the chapter, and that loop will continue until either the end of the 5th chapter or somebody ends the round, or I guess the chapter, with the required points. We don't need to worry about the cards here because it will automatically load everything in with the mod here. So as you can see, it pulled out a 3-player game map setup, and it automatically removed the sectors on either side of the map, as it says to do so here. And it went ahead and set up all of the player pieces, as well as assigning randomly a player to get the initiative marker. In addition to the player pieces and zones of the map being set up, it will also give the resources depending on your starting location. So in this case, for instance, red is starting on a material planet and a weapons planet. So it will automatically get those resources placed onto your player board. And it will deal the cards necessary for the court deck. So it'll shuffle the court deck and it will deal, or I guess reveal 4 of those cards. Once everybody is set up here, you can click on this blue button to start the round, and it will shuffle the action card deck and deal it to all the players. So as you can see here, it automatically dealt me my hand of cards. And now you are ready to play. Core concepts. Arc of play. In a game of ARCS, you play through a number of chapters, usually 3 to 5. They are tracked here with this pawn. Each chapter is made up of several rounds. In a round, each player will take 1 turn by playing an action card and doing various actions, starting with the player who has the initiative, which is here. Okay. Here are a few examples of action cards. The number, pips, suit, and the actions associated with that suit, and the ambition at the bottom. So for these 4, you have build, administration, mobilize, and aggression. Each of these cards will have different options, but each suit will share the same options. All of the ambitions are the same for each number. So for instance, each 3 is going to be for Tyrant. Each 6 is going to be for Empath. And then 5 for Keeper, 4 for Warlord, They're all listed right here. So if you're ever unsure, or if you're thinking something's going to come up and you forget which goes with which, it will automatically show you here. As an example, here is an aggression card. This aggression card is a 3, so it's on the lower end of what's available. It only has 2 pips. That's common. Aggression cards generally will have lower pips compared to other cards. So for example, here's a 3 of mobilization, and that 3 of mobilization will have a whole extra action associated with it compared to what the aggression normally does. So just because a number is the same does not mean the pips are the same, even if the ambition that can be declared is the same. Up to the number of actions that you have pips. So for this mobilization, you could move 3 times, or influence 3 times, or move once and influence twice, or any combination, as long as you're doing only 3 of those actions. Action cards are kept in a deck right here and can be dealt automatically using this utility. And as you play the game, you will be taking these cards and cleaning them up into this deck here. And it'll go right here. There are ways to play where you keep the cards face up that have been revealed face up, but as you're starting out, it's generally better to put them face down here. Everyone will continue to play cards from their hand until they no longer have any cards in their hand. And once that happens, the chapter will end and you will score ambitions. That brings us to ambitions. So players gain power by fulfilling ambitions. The player with the initiative marker may choose to declare an ambition shown on the action card that they're playing. So for instance, if I was the player with initiative and I played this 2 card, I could declare the Tycoon ambition with the symbol. So the symbols match, Tycoon. So I could left click on this little ambition declared token and it will automatically cover up the number of my cards. So now my card is a 0. I still get to do the actions for it. But the reason why I do that is because I want to place this token here. So these tokens will automatically be placed with the mod, but they are placed automatically depending on whichever one's the highest. So for instance, 5 will be placed first, then 3, then 2. As you play the game, these numbers will change. So for instance, at the end of the first round, the last one will switch, and then the next one, and then the next one. So you'll progressively get more and more points. Some rounds, players will not declare any ambitions, or they may only declare 1 ambition, or they may declare all of the same ambitions. So for instance, like let's say everybody's really fighting for Tycoon. This is a valid board state where all of them are on 1. Just keep in mind that all of the ambition tokens will automatically reset at the end of the chapter. Scoring points for ambitions. So once an ambition is declared, the player who has the most of that thing score the points for it. So in these examples, the Tyrant, so the player with the most captives, would score 5 points. And then if there was a second player that had the second most captives, they would get 3 points. If the first player was tied with the second player, so let's say each of them had 3 captives, then they would both score 3 points. But if there was, for instance, 3 people tied, then nobody would score any points. Or instead of like, I guess nobody scoring points for that, if like, for instance, 1 person was winning and then 2 people were tied for second place, then nobody would score second place. And you track those power points down here on the bottom. So each color will have one of these cubes. And you win the game by reaching the number of points listed here. So in a 4-player game, it's to 27 points, 3 players to 30, and then 2 players to 33. The map. The map is made up of 6 clusters. So we have cluster 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Each cluster has one gate, which is the system toward the center, and 3 planet systems, or I guess 3 planets. Each system is adjacent to all of the systems that share a thin border. So in this case, for instance, all of these are adjacent. So for instance, 5 is adjacent to this one here and here. But of course, this planet is not adjacent to this weapons planet because they are not immediately adjacent with this thin border. And neither is this weapons planet adjacent to this material planet because of this dark border that splits them. One thing you can't see is under here. So let me just unlock that. So here's an example of the 2 systems on either end that share borders between clusters are right here and right here. So you could pass between clusters on these edges. And for purposes of gameplay, these arrows are like hyperlanes, so they'll just automatically connect the system. So you cannot enter this system. This does not count. It'll automatically zip you over to the next one over. And then same goes for here, except this system is not a system for purposes of travel. So you could not, for instance, go through like here. You'd have to go down, over, and then back up in that example. Resources and cities. There are 5 resource types in the game: materials, fuel, weapons, relics, and psionic. There are 5 resources of each type. And yes, if you were wondering, that is not a whole lot. It is very common for one player to have all of the resources of a type. As you can see here, there are 6 slots. So it would be super easy for any player to completely take all of a particular type of an item. This is like not an uncommon board state, especially if somebody is going for an associated ambition. So for instance, like Tycoon is going to want you to get a lot of fuel and materials. Empath is going to have the player get a lot of psionic resource here. And Keeper is going to have you get a lot of relics. The only kind of weird interaction is the weapons does not have any ambitions directly associated with it, but it is indirectly associated with Warlord. These resources don't just represent, one unit of resource. They represent the entities associated with producing this resource. And so if you do something that makes them mad, for instance, like destroying a place where that resource is produced, then that resource will become outraged with you. To gain resources, you will need to tax loyal cities. So you have these little triangle command token like pieces that you can tax, and that will yield you one of the planet type. Taxing is an action that you can find with the administration action card. You cannot tax the same city more than once a turn. So even if you were taxing in the prelude for whatever reason, you could not also tax later in your turn using the actual action pips of the administration action card. The main thing that resources will allow you to unlock is more actions. On your turn, when you do an action, you can play resources. So in this example, if I was the blue player and I played this mobilization card, I could play additionally any number of resources. So here I have a fuel and a relic. I could play both of these to interact with other aspects of the game. So if I was going to play this fuel, I could use it to move an additional time. And then if I was going to use this relic, I could use it to interact with the core deck up here and secure. All of the interactions are listed right here, if you ever forget. And once an action is used using these resources, they will be returned here. you cannot mix and match when you use these actions. So for instance, if I were to do a prelude action with my fuel and relic here, I could not do some actions from my action card and then do actions with my materials or my resources. When resources are not spent, they are held here on your player board. They can be placed in any of these circular slots. So as you place cities on the board, these slots will become uncovered, as you can see. And they will open up more options for storing more resources. The top symbols is how difficult it is to take these resources. And this is their raid cost. It's represented by a number of keys, and I will explain this when we get into battling. The main thing, though, is you don't have to ever feel restricted by keeping them to the far left or keeping resources to the far right. But instead, you can keep your more valuable resources on the higher raid cost slots. If for whatever reason a city is returned to your play area or player board, you must move those whatever resources were on that spot. So in this case, I'd have to move my weapons here. And then if another city was returned, I would have to discard a resource to be able to place the city back. And then that resource would go right back. To place cities, you have to take the build action. So you can find that on an action card or you're using a material resource. When you build, you just take one of the little triangle city tokens and you place them on an empty city slot on a planet. As long as you control that system, you can put that down. So in this case, for instance, here we have a system that I control. So here's blue. I could just place that like that. If for whatever reason I wanted to place a city in a system that I do not control, I would be able to place it, but it would come in damaged. And the same goes for starships. So for instance, if red here was over here and my ships were over here, and they wanted to build something, like build a ship, for instance, then that ship would come in damaged. So it'd come in like this, sideways. Very simple. And I'll go over that more in detail later. But just for reference, if you need to damage a building, you just press the F key to flip it over. And if you need to damage a ship, you press the 2 key on your keyboard, and it will automatically flip it on its side. And you press the 1 key to flip it back. And the same goes for starports. And you just grab starports from your supply here on your player board. And then when you build ships, you grab them from the supply here. And ships can be placed at your starports. And then the agents, though, these are placed with the influence action. So that'll bring us to the next section. Agents and the court. So on the right side of the board, there is the court consisting of the court deck, which is going to be 31 cards. At the start of the game, 4 of those cards will be revealed. These cards share just slightly different types. So as you can see here, there's 2 different types. There's guild cards, which are just kind of like a regular card. And then there are Vox cards. Main difference is guild cards generally are cards that will stay in your player, while Vox cards are like a one-time event. So generally, these are when you secure the card, it will trigger a specific action. To gain these cards, you will influence the court. So using the influence action, you will take an agent, which is one of these little blue little dude guys kind of standing, and you will place it over on the card that you're interested in. So for instance, if I was interested in Galactic Bards, I would place my agent right here. Sometimes you guys will want to place their cards on top of the card. but it just is kind of hard to see. So even like here, if I was like playing the game like this, and generally you'll leave your map like this, it's like really hard to see that. It's like almost impossible. So people have started placing them up top. Doing another action, you can secure it, and that will allow you to take the card, place it in your play area. You'll get your agent back. Go back to your supply, and then a new card is revealed. So that is how that goes. Although, of course, generally, as you play the game, it's not necessarily always going to be as simple as one agent grabs the card. A lot of times, somebody will want to fight you for the card, or I guess not fight you for the card. They'll want to influence that core card more so. So, for instance, let's say yellow's interested. Let's say white places a guy here, and then, of course, me, I'm blue, so I'll place two guys here as well, right? So all of us have a stake in this card, but none of us can secure it because I'm tied with yellow, yellow's tied with me, and if white has one less than everybody else on the skirmisher's card. So I would have to influence again to then have enough to secure the card with the secure action. And then all of these agents will be captured. And of course, your own agents can't be captives, so you'll just put those guys back. And then all of these will go here. And this little nifty counter will count for you. Keep in mind that all these captives, they will stay in the captive zone, not in the trophy zone. And as you can see, the symbol matches for Tyrant. So the number of your captives will determine your ability to score Tyrant. Keep in mind, though, that Tyrant is an ambition that has to be declared, and only until the ambition is declared and scored will captives return on cleanup. So it is also common for a game that has gone on for a while, maybe nobody declares Tyrant, that there will be a ton of captives stuck on one player's player board. And that can make things extremely difficult if you're trying to, of course, influence the court, because you no longer have the guys available to do that. So try to declare Tyrant if that ever is an issue. Same with Warlord as well. So if a ship is ever destroyed in combat, it'll go to your trophies as well. Okay, moving on to the next section. Okay, so damage and control. So sometimes you do have to battle your foes, right? Because they do something you don't like, or they're in an area that you don't like, or you just want to be a warlord or a tyrant for that matter. So at the start of the game, all of your buildings and ships will be fresh. And fresh is just when they are on the upright side or the side that does not have the little borders on the corners. Those are fresh. And as a reminder, you can press 2 on the keyboard to flip your ships, or 1 to the damage side. So that's important. It's not like Root, where in Root, all your guys only have like 1 life or health. In ARCS, all of your ships can be damaged and they can still move around and do things as necessary. Of course, damaged ships are not quite as good as fresh ships, so control is not going to matter as much with damaged ships. So for example, here's a red fleet and a blue fleet. Even though they're tied for the number of ships, because blue has more fresh ships, it would of course be the leader. And this counts for any number of damaged ships. So even if red had all of these ships here, if these were damaged, then blue would still be the kind of ruler of that zone. As you're playing, your ships will become damaged. And in combat, it takes just 2 hits to remove them. So that's how you calculate it. And we will go over that more later. Playing a chapter. Of course, we would start the round. And then you would be dealt a card. The player with initiative, in this case, I'm going to steal it from yellow, and I will be the one with initiative, would play a card, and that would be considered the lead card. They would have the option at this point to declare the ambition or start their actions. So if I was going to start my actions, I could do 3 movements or some moving and some influencing. Once I do that, the next player could then play a card. So let's say they play this card. So this is a 3, but you cannot follow with the same suit, but it'd be less than the lead card. So in this case, if, for example, the red player wanted to play this, it would have to flip it over and it would copy the lead card to do one of the actions of the lead card. Another player could also play a card that does not match, but when a card does match, it just has to be higher. So in this case, this one is lower. It can't be played, so it would be just a copy, so you only get 1 action. But this card is higher than 4, so you would be able to do everything associated with this card. So you'd be able to do the 2 actions, and now you would be the leader, which is nice because when you're the leader, that means you get the initiative token. But if you don't want to do the action of the leader, you can also play any card you want, and you just get 1 action of that type. And then the player who has the highest number is the leader, and so they would then take the initiative. Okay, that is not seizing, that is just surpassing. Seizing is when a player does either a seize there's like seizing cards, and it'll say seize the initiative. Usually that involves like placing something near here so you remember. Or the more common way is if somebody, for instance, declares, administration 6, right? It's like, it's going to be very hard for anybody to play higher than a 6, especially in a 3-player game. There is no other higher number. 7 is the highest, but that only is for 4-player games. So it kind of makes everybody out of luck. So even if like another player played this too, it's like, well, shoot, I need to have the initiative for the next round. So what they can do is they can take another card from their hand, flip it over, and then burn it essentially, and that will seize the initiative so that they can then take the initiative and they can place it over here so that everybody knows like they're the ones that have gotten it for next round. Once the initiative has been seized, it cannot be seized again. So you can't take it from another player again. You can only do this one time. And that's different than surpassing. Surpassing isn't seizing. Slightly same outcome, but big difference is you would then be down 1 card, or you'd have to spend 1 of your cards from here if it says, for example, seize the initiative. So here's a great one, Lattice Spies. I'll just put this here. So before you any other actions, you may discard this card to seize the initiative. And then it just says a little reminder at the bottom, you can't seize the initiative if it's already been seized. So you would use this, and then you discard it, which would go over here. Okay. That covers most of the turn structure. Just remember that the basics are lead card gets played, then that player will do all of the actions associated with it. If they want to, they can declare ambition. If they do declare ambition, the card will effectively become 0. Then if you play a card that matches the suit, it must be higher, and that will be a surpass, so they would then get the lead card. But if another player wants to take the lead card, they can play any card and another card. They, of course, do not get the actions for this other card. This is just a burnt card, so nothing is done with it action-wise. And then whatever card they played, they get to play as normal. So in this case, they would pivot, and they would get 1 action of the mobilization suit. And if you're ever unsure, you can always look here, and it'll tell you the 3 things you can do. You can surpass, copy, or pivot. Surpass, copy, pivot. As you play the game, you'll get a better sense of like when is a good time to play a card or not. Usually what I do is I will organize my cards based on when I kind of want to play them. So if I know like, oh man, I have like a lot of materials, so I'm for sure going to need to declare materials or tycoon, then I know that I'll need to put myself in a position where I can win the trick, which is like 1 round essentially. so I can then be the one to declare tycoon later. So if you ever do surpass, though, you do just take the initiative. Otherwise, the initiative will stay with the active lead player. And of course, at the end of the round, after everybody has played a card and done their actions, you clean up the cards and you start anew. So everybody will go through, they'll play a card, go around the table, and that will be the round. You will keep going around, playing one card each, doing the actions, and the next player will go, checking for initiative, passing it around, and then that player will go until everybody's out of cards. Once everybody is out of cards, the chapter will end. And then, of course, at the end of the chapter, you will go down all of the declared ambitions, scoring the amount of points listed, or I guess the amount of power listed. So in this case, if somebody wins here, then they'll score the points down here. Sometimes there are cards that will allow you to have an extra card. So here's a great example. Construction Union. So it's a card that is played after you play an action card, but before you do any of the actions from that action card. That's the prelude. You may place this card next to a face-up played construction card, and then when the round ends, draw that card back into your hand. So in this case, I don't have a single construction card, just kind of annoying. Okay, here we go. Here's one. So I would play this, and then if this was in my play area, I could, before I did any actions for my construction card, play this card right here. And then everybody would know that this card, instead of being going back to the deck, would then come right back to my hand. And then this card would be discarded. So that is a very powerful card. Having more actions than anybody else will basically secure you the initiative marker at the very end, because if the lead card cannot be played by the current player, it will get passed to the next player, and then the next player, and then the next player. As long as they have a card to play, they can keep this initiative marker. So time for some rapid fire stuff. So standard actions. Okay, we have the tax action. So here we go. Boom. Tax. What does tax let you do? Tax lets you choose a loyal city or a rival city. And I guess it's not a city, it's a starport. So here's these two cities here. Yep. And it lets you take one resource from the supply. So if I was playing as blue in this case, and I was in the system, I control this planet, I can tax it and get one material, which I would then place on my player board, just like that. That's a tax. If I tax this rival city, so in addition to getting one material, I would also gain a agent. So I can take this agent from his play area, and I would capture it by putting it in my captives. So very, very powerful to capture agents that way. So it's basically like getting more value from the same action, because you can also, of course, tax on your own cities. So if I were to tax this weapons planet, I would grab weapons, place it on my player board, but I would not be able to capture my own agent. Okay, remember that you cannot tax more than once, and the agents will be returned once Tyrant is declared, or I guess scored. But for now, I'll just give it back. All right, building. Okay, so here we go. Here's the next card we're going to learn about. Construction, build or repair. So building allows you to place a city or starport or ship. And remember that you can place it, if you control the system, it'll come in fresh or ready to go. Or if you are not controlled, then that piece will come in damaged. So for instance, in this case, if yellow wanted to build another building here before blue could, they could, of course, place a city and it would come in damage. So it'd be coming just like that with the corners tarnished. They probably would want to do something like this, maybe, so then they could build more ships. But that's up to the player. Who knows what they have planned. So the next one is the move action from mobilization. There's also move on aggression cards as well. So this move action will allow you to move ships. Pretty straightforward. Generally, when you take a move action, you will move ships to an adjacent system. Just like that. So if I was here in this gate and I were to move my ships here, that would be one action move. And then I can move here as well. That would also take an action. The other move option is moving from a starport. You can do a catapult move, which will allow you to move any distance as long as you are moving from the starport and don't run into other planets or other players' pieces. So for instance, I could go here. I could go here to this gate and then go up and here, and then I could stop here. That would count as one move. When you do one of these catapult moves, you can also drop things off. So if I wanted to move here, and then drop a ship off and then go here, that is also valid. If I was moving as well, I could go here, move over here, and then once I hit this system, because there are enemy ships, I would stop. And then remember, for purposes of movement, these little arrows are kind of like hyperlanes, so you just automatically scoot over when you're moving through them. The next action that we'll go over is repair. So repair is a construction or an administration action. Repair will allow you to take either a ship or a building and flip it to its fresh side. And this can be any ship or building. The only thing that you should remember about that is that this can be done anywhere. So even if you don't control it, you can still do it. So even if like yellow was damaged here, they had all this stuff damaged, they could, in theory, do all three of these, just like that. And that would count. The next one is influence. Influence is an administration or a mobilization option. So influence. And influence allows you to take a agent from your supply and place it in the court. Pretty straightforward. Secure is an action only found on aggression cards. So here we go, just like that. Secure. Secure will allow you to take the cards that have agents in them and put them in your play area, as long as you have more agents than any of your rivals or any other player. Just keep in mind that when you do that, you will secure, when you secure an agent, you will capture all of the agents that another player has on that card. And when you do that, as soon as you secure it and the action finishes, you will replenish that spot. And if there are any actions that say when secured, you would do them at that time. So for instance, here, call to action. So when you secured that, that would fulfill, or that would be completed when you do it. So you don't have to wait until the end of your turn or anything like that. And now for the big one, battle. Okay. So aggression, this is only found in the aggression card, but any card can use a weapons to add the battle action as an option. So for instance, if I was playing this administration card, I could play a weapons to do those actions. So this can be extremely devastating because generally aggression cards have one less action pip. So this administration card would be a good option because I could do 4 attack or battle actions as opposed to the maximum of 3 that can be found on the aggression card. So in combat, you follow a few steps. So you will declare a target system. So in this case, we can say that this yellow system, or this yellow city system with the 3 blue ships, is the active system. And you declare a target defender. So even if red had a 1 ship here, you would say, okay, I'm going to attack yellow, or I'm going to attack red. all of the ships that are your own ships are the current attacking ships. And then whoever you pick as the defender, all of their ships are the defending ships. As the attacker, you select dice up to the number of ships you have. So in this case, I have 3 blue ships. So I will go over to this nifty tool here, and I can pick up to 3 dice to roll in this little simulator. The dice are these little symbols here. They look like this. There's 6 of each. So I can do 3 red dice, for instance, if I wanted to. And then I could roll, and that would be the outcome. You can also press on this button to roll it, or reset it with that button. So when you are attacking, though, you can mix and match these dice. There are 3 types, as I said before. Each one's slightly different. So red is like more aggressive with a higher chance of taking damage. Blue is a 50-50% chance of doing damage, but you will never take damage. And then raid is risky as well. And it has options for destroying cities or buildings, and it has keys for raiding. So remember when I said you could steal cards? So for instance, like lattice spies, for instance, could be taken if you rolled 2 of those keys. So in this case, like let's say I did want to try to steal some cards from somebody. I could roll this and hit the roll button. And then you can count that key. So in this case, I drew 1 key. So if I was taking it from this player board here, I could pick any of the 1 key options to take. But that happens in a certain order, which you follow here. So if I was going to do this, roll it, you follow the steps. So step 1, damage your ship. So a little flame icon. Here's a 1 here. There's 1 here. That is what happens first. So you hover over your ships, you press 2. So I would take 2 damage. And then you do the next one, so intercepts. So there are no intercepts, but intercept is you just take damage for the number of defending ships that are fresh. So in this case, there's 2. So if an intercept was rolled, I would take 2 additional damage or hits. And then after that, you do the little stars. So no stars for me, so I didn't do any damage. But I did do 3 damage to a building. So I would do 1 hit and then damage this fully and remove it from the map, and I would take it into a trophy. Keep in mind that this would then trigger outrage. So I would check the planet type. So it is a materials planet. So I would take an agent from my supply, place it on top of this materials to signify that I've outraged it. And then all of my materials would be discarded. So that's pretty devastating because now I immediately lost that and I lose an agent for the rest of the game. If you don't have an agent available, you could use another piece just to cover it up until you get an agent back. If I had any cards here from the court deck, those would also be discarded as well, unless they said otherwise. After destroying a rival city, you will provoke outrage. And after you provoke outrage by discarding all of the matching resources and placing one of your agents onto the resource slot to indicate that it has been outraged, you will ransack the court. You will secure any card that has any number of defenders agents. So in this case, if I, as the blue player, removed a yellow city, then I would be able to secure all 3 of these cards because they all contain a yellow agent. So we'll go ahead and start securing them. So I'll take this guy here. And as with any secure, you'll take all of the agents. But when you ransack the court, they will not go into captives. They will go into trophies. And then you'll secure the next card. And you will resolve the when secured tag. And so this one would be discarded after it was resolved. Then you would take the agents from here and it goes to trophies. You cannot have one of your own agents as a trophy, so that would go to the supply. And then lastly, you would take this card as well in this case. And again, those would go to your trophies, and this card would come to your play area. So one thing to remember is that because ransacking the court happens after you would provoke outrage, you can still collect cards from the court that have this symbol or that are of the resource type that you've outraged. So if this card was in your play area before you had outraged that type, of course it would be discarded, but since it was acquired afterward, you can play it. So this is a very good upside when you sometimes have to outrage a particular resource. And that pretty much sums up combat. For more in-depth, please refer to the rulebook. They do have some information here. This is the page from the rulebook, so it talks about the dice. So there's the 6 sides of each of these dice, and then the steps, and then as well as a more full breakdown. This is helpful when doing timing or anything like that, but for the most part, it's fairly straightforward. Also, don't be overwhelmed by the options for dice. Once you realize like what your goals are in a combat, it's very easy just to select what you want, and then you can roll it. Action cards are just one of the ways that a player will interact with the game state, but the more consistent way of doing what you need to do is with the resources. So after you play an action card, you can play any number of resources to do additional things. Those things go as follows. So, as we said before, Psionic will allow you to do anything that the lead card does. So, for instance, if you were to play this Psionic resource, then I could do an additional mobilization. It's essentially like having a 5th pip or an additional pip on whatever card you're playing. This is extremely powerful. Then you have relics, which are, in addition to Psionic, probably one of the best, if not the best resource. So these two are probably the highest in terms of overall flexibility and options, especially this combo, even as an example. But relics allow you to secure. And remember, only aggression cards have the secure action. So having relics available to you is critical to being able to secure cards when you need to. And a lot of players will do this exact combo where they'll play Psionic and then a relic to do, for instance, one influence with the Psionic and then immediately secure. So that's the only way to get a card right when you want it. So that's relics. Then we have the only weird resource is the weapons. Instead of adding an action, it will allow you to do battle actions in addition to whatever the suited card is. So in this case, if I was to play this aggression or this weapons, I would then also be able to battle in addition to move and influence. Very useful. Again, the main thing with these is flexibility because you're not reliant on what cards you draw. So if this was the hand that I drew, I don't have any build cards. So if I want to build, I'm going to have to wait for another player to play that card, or I'm going to have to use a material. And I have 2 administrations, so I could definitely play this and then tax one of my cities to get that material. Just opens things up. Of course, there are a lot of combos that you can do with these as well. Definitely something to consider and play around with. If you need a reference, at the bottom here, all of those options are here. And this will also remind you when you have something that is outraged or not. So just remember, when you outrage a resource, you cannot use it for its prelude purpose. So for instance, if I outraged relics, then I could not spend a relic to secure a card. So really, really kind of tricky to play around sometimes, but that is part of the fun. So also remember, when you are securing with relics or with the aggression card, if it says prelude, you would not do that prelude action right then. So for instance, we can do this as an example. So I'll play this card. Let's say I played this relic. I secured this construction union card. I could not immediately say you may place this next to a face-up card, right? I couldn't do that, even if this was the construction card. I would have to wait until next round to do it. You have gone through all of the rounds. You've used all of your cards, and some ambitions have been declared, and now you are ready to end the chapter. So usually how this will work is we will go around in turn order, counting. So I'll say, all right, white, do you have any scored objectives? No. Okay, boom. And you go around one at a time. So for instance, has anybody scored Tycoon? Okay. And in this case, you can see here, yellow has one resource, and then red has one fuel. So they're tied, so they would each score 3 points. And then Warlord would score. Looks like blue is the only one who did combat, so they would score 2 points at the top. And then Keeper it looks like the only person with a relic is red, so they would score 3 points. And keep in mind though that you also score for the symbols on the court cards. So if, for example, yellow had this materials or this fuel, that would count for 3 when scoring Tycoon. So this is a very powerful way of increasing the supply of potential options for scoring a lot of these ambitions, because the materials and resources are extremely limited. There are only 5 of each of them. And like I said before, a lot of times they get absorbed very quickly. So as you're scoring, you'll add points up here, and if you have all of your cities out, can get bonus points. So here's an example. So this is +2 and +3 to 1 ambition. So if you had one of these revealed, then you'd get +2. If you had both revealed, then you get +5 to 1 ambitions. Keep in mind that 1 ambitions are only ambitions that you have won with first place. So you cannot get second place and still score that. So if, in this example, these players both scored for their 1 Tycoon resource, neither of them would be able to get bonus points because they're both getting second place. But if I won as blue with 1 trophy to get Warlord, I would then be able to score +5 points because of those 2 revealed slots. Once everybody has done scoring, all of these will return, and the lowest value one will flip over. So now, next round, more points are going to be scored. Okay, and that'll continue until the end of the round. And of course, the tracker moves up 1. If this was the 5th round, then the game would end even if no player scored the necessary amount of points to end the game. So it'd just be whoever has the lead in most amount of points. If there's ever a tie, it goes to whoever has the initiative or is closest in initiative order. And then, of course, to start the next round, you would shuffle this deck and deal it to everybody. Okay. The last thing that we'll go over is prelude actions, just how they work. So again, after you play an action card, but before you do any actions, this would be considered your prelude. This is when you can play resources from your play area or use actions from guild cards. Guild cards will sometimes have abilities or powers that can be only triggered in the prelude. So in this case, you can say this. For shipping interests, you could do prelude. You may discard this to gain fuel up to the number of empty resource slots. If the fuel supply is empty, steal the fuel instead. So as you can probably imagine, this is extremely powerful, especially when scoring Tycoon. So you could imagine a situation where a player has this in the play area. They play a 2. They declare ambition during their prelude. So now Tycoon is being announced, and then they could play this card. and then they could take all of the fuel up to the amount of slots that they have available. So in this case, it wouldn't be very good because they only get 3. But they could definitely set themselves up for a very strong move where they maybe get all of the fuel all at once, and that would really put them in a good position later in the game. Usually when you use a prelude action, you would discard the card. So this card would then go over to the discard pile. Sometimes this is not the case, but generally that is what happens. So that is how you do a prelude action from a guild card. The only other thing is when you do the special actions, you can see here, synthesize, build, gain 1 fuel. That will allow you to, instead of using a build action, you could do a synthesize action instead. All right, so that is pretty much it. Good luck as you begin your journey in ARCS. The first couple games should be played knowing that it is an extremely odd system compared to Root or Twilight Imperium, and players should expect things to get more smooth with repeated plays. If you are liking ARCS and want to expand your gameplay with asymmetric player options, try adding the leaders and lore cards. They are located way over here on the TTS mod. Boom, 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 boom. So I highly recommend it. If you're coming from Twilight Imperium, you may be able to start with one of these, but it is generally not recommended because of how different ARCS plays compared to some other games. Not having the actions available to you at every given time can be a little weird to wrap your head around. If you're coming from a game like Root, for example, that guarantees certain actions every round. I might do a video going over how to set these up. This mod is great because it will automatically set that up for you. So if you are interested in playing with it, you can click play with leaders and lore, and then you can click start base game, and it will automatically pull up a few options for you. And then of course, when you place this in your play area, puts one of those in their play area, then you can click on the setup leaders, and it will automatically place those cards where they need to go. Cards and items and all that. So highly recommend it, but not until after at least probably 1 game. So have fun, and hopefully this video helps out online.